Hey guys, this is Luke Johnson. Today I'm joined again with Charles Clifford Brooks III, and we're going to be talking about Wallace Stevens. And I don't know a lot about this particular poet or his poetry. I did a cursory glance, and to my chagrin, there's not really a whole lot available on YouTube about Wallace Stevens or this particular poet, this particular poem, I should say. And I'm just really grateful that we have someone like Cliff to teach us about Wallace Stevens and this poem, which is called Disillusionment of 10 o'clock. So I'll stop talking there and I'll let Cliff do his thing.
Wallace Stevens was one of those rare poets who was able to maintain his day job, his personal life, and then be creative without making a train wreck of it, which is typically why we don't hear a great deal about him, Carl Sandburg, William Carlos Williams, the more stereotypical genre of self-imploding cliches. Though they did have good work, they became a caricature of themselves with quality in the beginning. And I can make a laundry list of those, but I'm sure I'll make immediate enemies, and I've had enough hate mail to deal with for a lifetime. But Wallace Stevens, kind of a mathematician of words. What makes him very rare to me as far as poetry is concerned is that he didn't try to stick to something as strict as an iambic pentameter or an Elizabethan sonnet or anything like that. But with Disillusionment at 10 o'clock, just to introduce that and read it first, to let you hear again aloud, one, how important it is, again, to hear these things read aloud. It's meant to, whether you're writing a term paper, your dissertation, or something creative, read it out loud. You will catch the grammar. You will catch the lack of nuance or the run-on sequence of thoughts that sounds great in your head, as often happens to me. But when you actually articulate it to slow down and enunciate, you realize that maybe you've gone a little too far. Wallace Stevens never does that. And Disillusionment of 10 o'clock is from his first book of poetry called Harmonium. He's a very musical poet. Actually, he's one of those dear favorites of mine. And he's got some longer pieces, but I wanted to, and we'll come back to those, but I wanted to start with Disillusionment at 10 o'clock to read the poem. The houses are haunted by white nightgowns. None are green or purple with green rings or green with yellow rings or yellow with blue rings. None of them are strange with socks of lace and beaded centuries going to dream of baboons and periwinkles. Only here and there, an old sailor, drunk and asleep in his boots, catches tigers in red weather. The poem is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 15, 16 lines long. Each line is 4 to 5 words long. The poem itself, the white houses are haunted by white nightgowns. And it's the idea of people going to sleep, people living their lives. It's the artist's bent of how do you say something the way you say it. And in finding that voice and in saying it your way, you create that harmonics of your own within your own work, that if someone didn't see your name or see it in your book, that they would, not because it's using the same language, but the flesh of it, the face of you, the corporeal fingerprints of your linguistics become so specific and familiar, and in many cases either inspiring or consoling, that work endures, that intent lives on. and it's in the very simple use of language. As with music, the genius is in the distance and in the quiet between the notes. It's not in the over complicating and the elaborate mix of how complicated can you make this sound, because it ends up just like with words as noise. If you use poetry as pure imagery, it's tantamount to using a photo album with different pictures from different families in no discernible order, leaving the one with the book saying, these people look happy, well, what does this mean? Wallace Stevens was a poet of direct intent. He believed that poetry and literature in general has the ability to cause great positive change in people. He believed that the imagination of not just artists, but really people, humanity, if they would accept it and let it go wild, which we are taught over time not to do, sadly enough, that the imagination is where youth is kept and maintained. And almost as a child, of your window today, at the houses next door, everyone bedding down for the night, especially if you're a night person, and people putting on typically their white T-shirts or they're getting into their night clothes, and the idea of did they really live that day? Now it's the night has come and people are bedding down. Are they really just white because they're in nightgowns or nightshirts, or are they haunting their own lives, their own homes, because they're not living? None of them are green or purple with green rings, or green with yellow rings, or yellow with blue rings. None of them are strange. This same idea that goes back to the only mythological creature of story or myth that has been in every civilization that we can find and know their lore is the zombie. And I believe that's because I think that by and large people have, whether persuaded or coerced into a more bowed, hands out, thoughtless state, or if that's just a more comfortable place for people to be sometimes, that underpinning of not asking questions and going with the flow has always been around. And a life not examined is not worth living, to paraphrase Socrates. And Wallace Stevens was one of those people who really picked apart life. And what he does is, as with childlike wonder, you're looking out at the people bedding down, and then the double entendre there of, these ghosts, none of them are truly alive. They're breathing, they're walking, they're thinking, but they're not acting, they're not dreaming, they're not being themselves. They're a ghost or a shadow of what they could be or who they are. And then the play on colors. Now, you can go into the symbolism of what each one might mean, but to me, it's almost as if he has taken a very somber image and put literal fireworks into it. Purple with green rings, green with yellow rings, or yellow with blue rings. None of them are strange. These ideas that we are afraid to be cliche or to say out loud, to be normal is passe. And it's the same belief that I think Stevens had. None of them are strange with socks of lace, and then the beaded centuries around those. Anything that's eccentric or anything that draws attention to somebody being themselves. If you notice someone who is not trying to impress people with what they own, but dress the way that they feel, there's a comfort and a confidence you see there, but then you see the jealousy around them that are jealous of that, and then at the same time want to attack it and then kind of adore it. It's a very conflicting thing that I've seen happen again, time and time again, and that's what's made so many of these poems that I read and still valid today, still poignant today. So you have Wallace Stevens, who has seen these ghosts and then kind of comes in behind us with this symphony of color and then says something very bold about none of them are strange, and it's not used in a negative context. He's looking for that kindred spirit, or that same bloodline, that ilk that is perfectly odd. with their own little tweaks and oddities, their own earrings, bracelets, tattoos, things that, again, they're not doing to fit a status quo, but things that are kind of cerebral oozings of design upon themselves. And that's just being you. People are not going to dream of baboons and periwinkles. Why not? Why not? And such really contrasting images. The baboon slumped over, seeming not to think, you know, head and forehead and eyes to the ground all the time, to maybe see periwinkles. You know, again, this image that it can set up for you. Only here and there, an old sailor, drunk and asleep in his boots, catches tigers. I think he hems up the end in those lines. Who's going to dream of baboons and periwinkles? Only here is asleep in his boots, but in his dreams, and the one considered a vagrant and an outcast, maybe in his dreams, he's doing something worth talking about, catching tigers and red weather. In the heat and in the intensity of life, that tiger, whether it being a literal beast, as we kind of talked about with Blake, with Tiger and the Lamb, whether it be a literal beast that he is tracking rather, or if it's the demons and angels in ourselves that we're trying to tame or coerce to be more vibrant, that person that is seeming to be not one of us might be the one that you need to ask, hey, how'd you figure this out? How did you become this brave? Why did you decide to be this way? How do we know that this is not a wild night out that this sailor had is not a pattern, it's not an addiction, it's not a bad thing. The idea of just being a sailor, being out on the sea, whether it be with the military or it being your job as a tradesman, there's an adventure to that, and a wildness and an adventure to that. And so in a man who in his life was very composed and quiet, he drew from that somber, quiet genius a poetry that they group it with more of the fundamental, the more not so transcendental poets. He really kind of is. He's very dreamy in his poetry, but he delivers it with such a like I said, like a mathematician's exactness that it'll sneak up on you. Even his longer works are easy to read because of the same attention to detail. Disillusionment at 10 o'clock by Wallace Stevens is just a breath of the typhoon of brilliance this man possesses. And he would be in my top 5 poets for folks who are not familiar with poetry to get into, to see that poetry is not about confusing you. It is about bringing something out of you to create clarity. Because typically the creation of that poem, at least for me, allowed me to find that place of clarity.
It was a beautiful lesson and a beautiful poem.
Thank you.
Yeah. I noticed there's a little bit of an echo, but I think it's okay now. Something I want to ask you is, it doesn't seem like Wallace Stevens was all that appreciated in his life. It seems like like many great artists, great musicians, great painters, great philosophers, it took a couple decades for people to catch up with him. Do you have any speculative theories on why that was the case?
I think, and I've honestly given a thought, because the biggest fear of being an artist is being a success long after you're dead. And it's not to say that you want to be idol worshipped in life, but as I've said before, and I'll echo, in every other vocation, you want to achieve a level of success that will include stability whether it's financial or emotional. Wallace Stevens, he was happy in what he did for his for a day job, writing on the side, as was William Carlos Williams, as was Carl Sandburg to a large extent. I think that they weren't so much not a success during life. It's just that because I mean, he was published and he was respected and he was read within his lifetime, but he didn't make it the central focus of his everyday existence, which is what folks do that we tend to, and not falsely so. I mean, when you become extravagantly well-grounded and then successful in, say, music, that's what you do, and you tour, and or if you want to be a poet or a writer, that you were that one thing, and so you just hear more about them. As I opened with the lesson about us knowing more about the cliches and the self-inflicted vanity that really corroded their story as a whole. We know that because they made art their only focus in life, and it's as far as it's been for me. I need something else outside of one or one goal, because I will get obsessively focused on something, and I need that other thing. And Wallace Stevens, I think he perfectly merged his two lifestyles, as it was seen. Lifestyles, like the art scene must always be this wild place. I think the roots in that are not so much drugs and alcohol, but because it's up here, because we're allowed to say and think and sing and create these emotions that other folks feel and share. They're just not able to articulate it. And that's not a lack of intelligence. It's just that the ability and the talent that certain others are gifted with. Wallace Stevens lived an uncommonly quiet life as far as what we would see with artists. But over time, I think that people, one, he lived long enough that he was able to enjoy some of his success. If you see a lot of people who came out the gates quick and succeeded, they were very young and thus not ready, prepared. You know, they didn't have the software, as it were, to deal with so much input and so many folks at one time. And Wallace Stevens just kind of kept the pace, you know. And so I mean, again, he wasn't really he wasn't really eschewed in his life. He wasn't like where you have Melville with Moby Dick. He really was kind of a bitter guy, and hovered away. But again, it's, if you've ever tried to read Moby Dick, I truly respect it. But it's a tome of a good Lord, God Almighty. Come on, dude, what are you talking about?
I will have to say this.
Wallace Stevens, again,
Moby Dick is one of my favorite books.
And again, we've all got the white whale, dude. We've all got that, and it's whether it's that it's a symbolism that's to me it's almost haunting. That thing that you always want, the thing that you're always chasing, the thing that's just outside of you. From hell's halt, I stab at thee. I mean, it's just that it's. But to get to those good parts, man, it's like, dude, Melville. You were gonna be off on a whole another subject. Melville and his story, the link there, and I might get things thrown at me for saying this, but the book Infinite Jest was it kind of is of a similar, like, you got to work to the end of it. But as far as with poetry, with Wallace Stevens, he goes on that same hunt. With poetry, it seems to be a art form or a form of communication that people can kind of get sound bites of the journey instead of logging into a more prose poem or even fiction or nonfiction literal storytelling. That with poetry, you can literally pick it up and go to any page and just read a moment. You don't necessarily have to go from beginning to end. And with Wallace Stevens, he wrote for most of his life, and then once he came to a place that he felt comfortable with it, people were not adverse to what he had to say. He was accepted, and of course, again, he kind of went against the grain of the idea at the time that you needed to be cryptic and talk about books that no one else has ever read, in languages that no one's ever spoken or speaks now, to prove some elite intellectual property that you own, when all that did was so many potential fans of poetry, and it's still kind of a specter that haunts the scene today. The people that really have stood the test of time are folks that just tell you a story, and they tell it without pomp and circumstance. They don't thumb you in the eye, but they don't falsely apologize for it either. They make it in terms and in words that we all use, because sounding smart is an eloquent use of colloquialism. And it's not going so far as where you see like Shakespeare in today's language, where it takes all the beauty and the melody out of it. You see it in many translations. Unless you get a really good translator, you lose much of that original music. Staying firm to the course, and like my mama said, you can either bloom early and burn out, or you can blossom later and know how to maintain. You want, as an artist, again, like with any kind of success, you want it early, right out the gates, out of college. Where's my money? Where's the wife? Where's the kids? Where's my car? Where's my house? Just live and keep your eyes open, and try not to be a self-righteous jackass. Things will work out. And it's Wallace Stevens is one of those guys that I've consistently gone back to find my bloodline, my ilk. One of those people like Lawrence Ferlinghetti is another one of those that you read, and when you read them, you think, oh, it's like my family. It's like my brother. It's like that. It's like being able to sit down with a lost relative. And it's why I try to focus so much on not saying this is the way you must read this poem, but just opening the door to possibilities and hoping that folks kind of follow that through on their own.
Well, hopefully you, me, will be like Stevens, and we will sustainably blossom and bloom.
I know, man. Because I owe my mom a lot. So I've got to, I mean, seriously, man, I've got to build her like a monument and a couple of cars and probably an island somewhere. And my daddy too, good Lord, it's both of them. But it's being 40 and is in doing, what you love. It's to me, it's been one of those fascinating journeys of my life. Jung said that it's for men anyway, until 40, everything is just practice. And I truly believe that. It's happiness. It's that dream place. It's that childlike wonder that Stevens talks about in this poem that's I think maintained and helped us both in this mad world.
I think we're going to crush it, Cliff. I think we're going to be just fine. I think it's a wonderful lesson. I'm going to bring it to a close there, unless you have anything else you want to say.
No, just thank you for letting me do this, man.
Thank you for doing such an excellent job today. I think we added tremendous educational value to the Noetic educational app and platform, and to the internet in general. And I'm very lucky to have you as a friend and as a teacher. Thank you.
I appreciate every word of that, brother. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Cliff.
You too, brother.
See you.